If I say mobile heritage interpretation, what do you think of? I know what you think of. You think of this. You think of audio trails, you think of downloadable apps, you think of screens, phones, tablets, you think of apps that go ping when you're walking along the street and tell you you've arrived at an important destination, and then information is relayed to you at the spot where you've arrived. All that, you know, that's the general. I know there are variations, but that's the standard model. And there are certain things we need to think about, I think, when we're analysing how these things are constructed. First of all, they're often not actually engineered or made possible by people who are pursuing good history. I mean, they might be, and they might be on board, but more often than not, they're about community engagement, which is quite a wide, has many open meanings, and often also engineered by local councils whose interest is in economic regeneration. This is quite a good example. This is one for Burnley, where they've created an area called the Weaver's Triangle, as it says on the tin here, was once at the heart of the town's textile industry and is now part of a major regeneration programme. And let's call a spade a spade. It aims to capitalise, good word, on the distinctive heritage of the area in order to strengthen the local economy and boost tourism. So we know where we're going with this stuff, okay? We also know that people have not the deepest pockets in the world. So we need apps that can be delivered off the peg. We need, when I say we, I mean, particularly town councils or small heritage organisations looking for an app to advertise the heritage of their area, looking for something that can be easily afforded, which isn't too complicated, as audio trails say here, something which offers you more bang for your buck. And they're not all completely straightforward, of course. They're not just things that go ping when you arrive at the right place and deliver information. There are, even in the cheapest versions of these audio trails, there are ways of delivering a certain amount of interactivity. I've just added in red on the screen there what I think are the key phrases. These are all from the manufacturer's advertising blurb, key phrases. We want to get people to get involved. How do we get them engaged? We'll get them badges, receive badges. Share your trip with your friends in social media, something we all want to do these days. And more stuff will be uploaded because it's interactive. We can keep uploading it. You can't do that with a guidebook, can you? But you can with an app. And we'll make sure you get more badges. So fine, no problem. We also get quite a lot of these now, quite a lot of augmented reality about the place, interesting stuff. Hold up your screen and see through it to a representation of what the historic site might once have looked like in an artist's interpretation. This one's from the Glamorgan Heritage Coast, created by Jam Creative Studios. Lots of them about, we know what we're talking about. So I know you know all this stuff, but I'm just saying this is this is the industry standard, what are its common factors? Its common factors are that it's mainly screen-based, it's authoritative in nature, there's usually an authoritative voice behind it, telling you, giving you information, which makes it a rather kind of top-down and passive experience. It's hard to get very interactive with media of this kind. And the trails that it leads you on are generally, we might as well call them, fairly linear. Question, could we or should we try to do more than that with the technology available to us? Sometimes I wonder whether the technology, the speed with which the technology moves on, is outstripping the ideas we bring to use with it. So that was my question. It makes me wonder, is it time for a rethink about how we use these materials? And I know, like I was born in 1957, which is ever such a long time ago. But in 1957, Freeman Tilden told us this about how we interpret our heritage. He had lots of bright things to say, but this is the one that always stays with me. The chief aim is not instruction, it's provocation. Sometimes we forget that. How can we provoke? Because when we provoke people, then their synapses start working more quickly, and then all kinds of interesting things begin to happen. Let's not just tell them stuff, let's provoke them. What are the ways in which we might provoke them? Well, I'm interested in game. There's been some talk about game, hasn't there? But I think it's very interesting game. Here's Greg Kostikian, talking about game. What is it about game that's interesting? I'm on his side here. Stories. We talk about narratives, talk about building stories into our designs. Yeah, fine. But he says, look, stories are linear. However much characters may agonize over the decisions they make the same way every time we reread the story. And the outcome, always the same. Games are inherently non-linear. They depend on decision-making. Decisions have to pose real, plausible alternatives, or they're not real decisions. It must be entirely reasonable for a player to make a decision one way in one game and a different way in the next. To the degree that you make a game more like a story, more linear, fewer real options, you make it less like a game. So games and stories, he says, are entirely different things. We need to remember that. So it gets me thinking, what can we do with heritage mobile interpretation that gets away from standard top-down, linear, information-heavy experiences for users and plays around with decision-making? What would happen? So what I did then was apply for some money. I managed to get £50,000 out of the AHRC to work with a creative industry partner. So I went off to the Pervasive Media Studio in Bristol, where I found a fantastic new experience design company called Splash and Ripple, who were totally on board with what we wanted to do here. We talked about it and we said, right, this is brilliant, let's do something. Rosie Pobright from Splash and Ripple makes street games. So she was interested and also interested in history. So I said, right, well, we're going to have to go and find a place to play in to develop our ideas. So we rocked up at the Holborn Museum in Bath. Holborn Museum, very interesting place, nice late 18th century development. Originally, this building, which is an arts and crafts museum dedicated to 18th century studies, pretty much, was constructed in 1795 as the entranceway to a fabulous Vauxhall-style garden, pleasure garden. Not very much of it is left. Few features. This is the loggia, one end of the garden, a sort of colonnaded gazebo. Most of the features have gone. So it was a place of light and sound and colour and dancing and drinking and eating and laughing and playing and fighting and all the things that people did in 18th century pleasure gardens, but it's now a municipal park. So the owner of the Holborn Museum said to us, or the director, Zar Sturgis, he said to us, fantastic, let's, you, me and React and the AHRC get together and build something that can transform the way people feel when they step out of the museum and into the garden. How can we bring back something of the sound and colour and light and experience of an 18th century pleasure garden? Are you up for that? We said, yeah, we're up for that. That sounds good. What have we got to start with? We've got old maps. We've got old maps of the gardens. They're pretty good. They're interesting. They tell us what it used to look like. So we've got a sort of a schemata. We can see that there used to be a fantastic maze. There used to be a ruined castle. The top, it does not mark the ruined castle, but top that side, far end of the screen, was a ruined castle with a moat, specially constructed to entertain the guests. Bowling greens and firework display areas. By the 1820s, there was a Cosmorama, a sort of late Georgian version of the cinema. Very exciting thing to have in your garden. All this stuff was in there. So we have that. We had some contemporary illustrations which told us a little bit about the layout, how it might have felt in the garden, a little sort of sense of what it might have felt like to be there. What kind of social mix would you find in the gardens? Who might you meet if you went in there? So that was all quite interesting. And then we thought to ourselves, okay, we've got that. What we need now is a kind of manifesto. We're not quite sure what we're going to build. We've got 50 grand and we've got about 3 months to do it in. So what are we going to do? Well, we're not going to build a digitized guidebook. Guidebooks are great. I love guidebooks, but let's not just make one into a phone app because that's not really exploiting the design much. So, all right, we won't have a digitized guidebook. What else won't we have? We will not have a downloadable phone or tablet app because I've seen enough of them. They're great, but I don't want to make one. Phones are, clever. It's a little computer in your hand. It's a wonderful thing. but they don't look very exciting. And personally, I get a bit fed up with visiting sites of great historic interest and watching people staring at it through screens or engaging with it through a screen. It'd be quite nice not to engage with it through a screen. And I don't want to assume, actually, that everyone who visits a historic site knows how to operate one of these bloody things. So let's not assume familiarity. Let's use the technology, but let's not have actually a phone or a tablet, and not something people download onto their own phones. We'll be in charge of how this thing is delivered, whatever it might be. So we're going to have to think of a way of delivering what we do, but it's not going to be on a screen. And then I thought to myself, this is the other thing. Heritage professionals will come to creative designers and say, well, build us something to go in our heritage site. And we've got lots of research done. We've got all this and this in our collection. And heritage professionals will engage with the creative designers and something will happen. But what often doesn't happen is that historians are brought in and said, well, what do you know? I mean, could we do anything new? And as a historian, I like to think that we can. So my thing about late 18th century culture is that it's often depicted as a place where bourgeois, wealthy, comfortable people made marriage trysts in nice colonnaded parts of the city. It wasn't. Where are the real people? So I like to do history from below. So I thought, well, give us a chance. We'll go to the archive and we'll bring back the voices, the characters of people who once walked in Sydney Gardens, but not the upper class. The people below. I can find you pickpockets. I can find you waiters. I can find you ground staff. I know I can if I look. Bit of a challenge, but anyway, I said it, so I went and did it. And then I thought the other thing is, people often say, well, if you're a kind of grumpy historian working with a museum and some creative people, the grumpy historian usually sort of folds his arms at some point and says, well, that's not right anyway. And I'm not signing up to that because that's bad history. And you've got to there has to be a point where the historian stands back and says, I like your imaginative interpretation of my data. Actually, I think it might work. Why don't we just kind of see what happens if I put my stuff in and you put your stuff in and we'll make something new. So tackling the divide between empirical research and the imagination was also a must. And I said I was interested in game. So game with a purpose, critical play. What we decided in the end was there would be historically researched material available in an audio form in this space. And people would have to interact with that and make decisions about what to do next. Taking Kostykion's strictures to heart, I know that means we've got to not just give them badges because they've gone to the right place and been given one. We've got to get them making decisions which matter, which count, which change the way the experience occurs. So we chose a choose-your-own-adventure scenario. When you were kids, you had books, choose your own adventures. Go to page 12 if you think Jimmy's got the diamonds in the old black castle. But if you think Esmeralda has taken them to the beach, go to page 37, And every time you do it, it's different. Why don't we do that in the real world? We can do it with GPS. Of course we can. So that's what we thought we would do. So I'm just repeating this. Agency for people who are using the space, understanding the space. They must make decisions, and the consequences they make will be real ones. And I've got to think about earplugs, actually. I am grumpy, see? Earplugs. Don't isolate people. Let's do this together. It must be something we can enjoy together. Groups come to these places together. They don't want to be all isolated with headphones, so we're going to dump that, and we're going to broadcast. And we come back to, well, these were our people. So these were the people that I wanted to sort of bring back into the garden. So I'm going to stop rabbiting on, and I'm going to show you a short film of what we ended up making, because you're thinking, what did you make? What did you do? So the film probably explains it better than I can. Here it is. What Ghosts in the Garden has been about is about place, actually. It's about a distinct place, a particular place. Of course it's about history, and of course it's about pleasure gardens, but it's also about a park that people in this area walk in all the time without necessarily thinking about who's walked here before. So to uncover some real history, to think about the discipline of how we discover the real histories, how we put people from the past back into the land on which we walk, I think that's just such a valuable, that's so much better than making it up.
What we're hoping is that as they have this kind of physical connection to the past and they walk around and they're listening into stuff, it's going to paint the picture of what was going on here. And it was a busy, bustling place. There were all kinds of things happening. So we kind of want people to sort of go away with that experience.
Hello? Two stays in one place. One moment. I shall do it. Excellent! Allow me to introduce myself. My name is John Joseph Merlin, inventor, maker of musical instruments, and creator of amazing mechanisms.
The experience is powered by a game mechanic in the form of a choose-your-own-adventure scenario. So you start at the first scene and you're given a couple of choices and you need to decide what you're going to do. And there's some kind of jeopardy there or some kind of decision about who you're going to trust.
You should either head over to the wonderful Cosmorama with Mr. Bridle or walk up the hill to the swings to see if anyone's lurking.
The really unique thing about what we've done here is to allow a sort of a fictive representation of a pleasure ground to dominate the project, but a fictive representation that's thoroughly informed by real historical research. When I look at projects of a similar kind elsewhere in the country, it always seems to me that's not what we've got. And neither has this been a sort of a digital guidebook, which we didn't want to do that either. We wanted it to be much more involving and exciting.
So they get given one of these, which is the special listening device, and people go out and take the objects with them and listen into what's happening in different places.
I mean, these are the only surviving pleasure gardens, but nothing from the pleasure gardens survives. I mean, the labyrinth's gone, all the excitements are not there, and I think and hope what this sort of experience gives a sense of is quite what used to happen here, the life there used to be of lights and fireworks and illuminations and labyrinths and swings and all the rest of it. And so I hope they get a sense of the sort of layers of history through where we are.
My delivery method is either through lecture, seminar, presentation, or through book or learned article. So I can talk to public audiences that way, but it's very kind of one way. But this, of course, is an entirely different thing. We're allowing the public, more or less, to kind of find their own way through the research. So these are just new ways of working for me. These are new kinds of outcome, and I've had to listen to people from other disciplines about what will work and what won't work, and I'm just not used to this. But I think I've done quite well, really.
I think that we've done it. I think people are coming back and they're talking about how they feel about the space, and they're using language about imagining what it was like, and they're saying, you know, it's evocative, that the soundscape made them imagine what it was like when it was a pleasure garden, and that was exactly what we were trying to achieve.
Oh, you still here? You get along and follow Mr. Bridle to the Cosmorama or find out if there are any beggars by the swings. Hurry!
The important thing is the magic. It's working. That's it.